and School District Board of School Directors. All please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, it's my pleasure every month to introduce our EHS Student Government Association representatives, Ms. Kaler and Ms. Howard.
Good evening, everyone. We're excited to be back this month to discuss recent events at the high school. As winter sports wrap up and spring sports start, we are proud to recognize the athletes that have made it to the postseason. The girls' basketball team won the East Penn Conference Championship 2 weeks ago, and last Friday they went on to defeat Northampton in the district game. So congratulations and good luck to them as they compete tomorrow night against Parkland in semifinals. This weekend at the District 11 Individual Wrestling Championship, Olivia Krupp was named District 11 Girls Wrestling Champion, and Jesse Scott earned his 100th varsity win. District 11 Diving Championships were held last Saturday, and District 11 Swimming Championships are this weekend. The first day of practice and tryouts for spring sports is March 3rd. The football coaches are on the lookout for new place kickers and punters for the fall 2025 season, so interested athletes should reach out to Coach Fairclough or Coach Hildebrand. Moving on to SGA, among other small student engagement activities happening in the upcoming month, SGA is beginning to plan for our annual Final Fest this spring.
Along with sports and SGA, this past Thursday, Emmaus High School students registered for their classes for the 2025-26 school year. Current 10th and 11th grade students interested in participating in the field study program for next year need to complete the application by March 31st. For sophomores and juniors thinking about becoming a teacher, the EHS field study program has partnered with Kutztown University and is offering an opportunity to take college-level courses at KU for college credit. There will be an informal meeting in the MMR tomorrow, February 25th, for interested students. LCTI applications are also now open for the 25-26 school year. Students can find the application in your Class of Schoology folder. Any students interested in taking a science-based trip to London and Paris through June 22nd through July 2nd, 2026, should contact Mr. Ohl for more information, as well as tickets for the spring musical Mamma Mia on April 2nd through 5th are now available on the EHS website. And the next SAT session will be held at EHS on March 8th. Seats are still available through College Board. And to recognize certain students and clubs, 10 Emmaus High School student vocalists are advancing to District Chorus. Ryan Maxted is February's Art Department Student of the Month. Emmaus dance team attended an NDA last week and placed sixth for their hip hop routine, and the chess team finished this season with an 8-1 record. Interact Club collected 900 books to support students coming through the LVHN clinics, and the Activism Club hosted a soup bowl food drive and collected canned goods for local food pantries leading up to the Super Bowl. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much for your report. Are there any questions or comments from the board? All right, as usual, there's a lot going on at the high school. And again, I invite you to stay for the meeting if you wish, but if you have other endeavors, you may be excused for the evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night. Okay, our next item on the agenda are requests to comment at the board meeting. I have one request this evening. But before I call that person's name, I'd like to read the following statement. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with public comment, speakers should feel free to express their opinion, comment, or question, and understand that this is not an interactive engagement with the board or with the administration. Please direct your correspondence to the chair. Be respectful, not engage in profane rhetoric, not disclose confidential personal information regarding staff or students, or comment on matters in violation of the law or board policy. And be mindful that others, including students, may be listening. I would request that you consider that protocol when making your comments. For the members of the audience, please also be respectful and refrain from speaking during the public comment period. With that, I will now announce each speaker and their topic. When you step up to the podium, again, state your name. You'll have 3 minutes within which to speak, and I will provide a 30-second warning for when your time is up. Our only request for this evening is from Ms. Heather Harlan, who's going to talk about libraries.
Good evening. Thank you for your time and thank you all for your service to our community. I'm here today simply to shout out our libraries in our schools and the librarians who make everything work for our students. I've read a piece of research recently from 2023 that cites 4 reasons why school libraries still matter. And they're all related to student achievement. So students with full-time librarians in their schools score higher in reading and math than similar students in schools without full-time librarians. It's also been shown that the higher the library budget and the number of titles that students have access to also improves achievement for students. And also how many books and other resources go out every week. And the higher the weekly circulation, the higher the achievement for our students. So I just want to thank you all for supporting libraries in our community, and a shout out to the librarians who make this work. This is not easy to have to manage all of this, but professional librarians not only need a bachelor's degree in Pennsylvania, but also a master's in library science. So I know this hard work, this important work of making sure our students are literate and well-read and engaged in their learning, they're in the hands of some really amazing people. Thank you all for supporting it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Harlan. That concludes request to comment. We will now move on to the approval of minutes from the February 10th, 2025 meeting. May I have a motion?
Second.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, Mr. Saul, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Fagley?
Aye.
Ms. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Ms. Klotz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Mr. Saul. Next item is the district update from Dr. Campbell.
I'm going to do my best not to do too many duplicates from what our student reps mentioned earlier this evening, but we do have several groups that we'd like to congratulate for their outstanding achievements in the past month. Specifically, we have quite a few vocalists from Emmaus High School who are advancing to the PMEA District Regional Chorus, including Emily Brown, Anna Chavoya Ramirez, Santiago Chavoya Ramirez, Charles Kenny, Tom McDonald, Varun Rajam, and Ben Wilkes. We'd also, again, like to recognize the Emmaus High School chess team. They finished 8-1. Specifically, we have 2 gold medalists, Ethan Park and Zinnig Fan. Zinnig Fan was undefeated this season. A silver medalist, Aiden Cannon. And again, Zinnig had a perfect 9-0 season record, so pretty amazing accomplishments. We'd also like to congratulate several Emmaus High School students who were recently recognized as the LCTI Students of the Quarter for the second marking period. Those individuals are Jonathan Bachman, William Bender, Mackenzie Clifford, AJ Farrer, Aaron Fox, Ross Gall, Austin Lauer, Tyler Lehman, Dominic Lightcap, David Nemechek, Madeline Roach, and Samora Watts. Great job to them for their outstanding accomplishments at LCTI. And as previously mentioned, our really remarkable Emmaus High School girls basketball team is the EPC champs. We wish them luck tomorrow evening as they face Parkland again and continue in the District 11 playoffs. And so we'll be thinking about them again and wishing them great luck tomorrow on their journey. We're excited that there are some events, some really great events coming up this spring in the district. Specifically on March 29th in the high school cafeteria, we will host our East Penn International Fair. There'll be great foods, cultural performances, arts and crafts, language lessons, again, for families and students of all ages. We'd also like to invite those who are residents in the East Penn School District and perhaps have students who aren't currently attending East Penn schools but planning to transition to East Penn schools for next school year. Sometimes we have students from private parochial charter schools who make the decision to transition back to, or transition to East Penn, particularly perhaps from 5th to 6th grade, 8th to 9th grade. And so we just want to let those families know that certainly we look forward to welcoming them in the East Penn School District, and we are currently taking registrations for next year. We prefer that students and families complete the registration process as soon as possible so that particularly at the secondary level, we can begin the course selection process with those students and appropriately plan and program for them for next year. As we think about the end of the school year and celebrating our 8th grade graduates and our senior graduates, the East Penn Education Foundation is again sponsoring its grad sign sale. And so the class of 2025, again, for either 8th graders in the middle school or Emmaus High School seniors, families can purchase a grad sign for $28. That discounted price is available through April 15th, and then the price is $30 thereafter. And the sale is open through May 12th. And you can visit any of our middle school, high school, or district websites for ordering information. We also are excited to recognize our Emmaus High School graduating seniors through the Grad Spotlight program, and so that nomination process is currently open through March, and we encourage community members, family members, faculty members to nominate a graduating senior for their outstanding accomplishments. We're also excited to welcome new kindergarten students for the 25-26 school year, similar to our registration process for other students. That process happens online. It opens on March 1st, so that's next week, or actually this weekend. And you can also reach out to any of our elementary buildings as well as our registrar, Mrs. Wendy Crosley, for more information, and we're happy to talk you through that registration process, and always look forward to welcoming our newest students to the East Penn family. Now, that's all the updates I have for tonight.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Campbell. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Just one comment.
Ms. Ford?
I just wanted to thank the district and the superintendent for always acknowledging Black History Month on the website, and to wish everyone a successful Black History Month as it comes to close for February.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Anything else? Okay, thank you, Dr. Campbell, for that report. Next item on the agenda is in relation to the EPSD facilities plan, and excited to hear what will be one of several presentations coming up, this one tonight on the K-8 Realignment Programmatic Update. Dr. Campbell, would you like to introduce?
And we just need a minute to project the presentation. You might recall our team made a presentation earlier this school year in the fall, in October, at which time we provided the board and the community with an update of our K-8 realignment, and we're extra excited to be here, to be back again this evening with a public update on the realignment work in East Penn. As a very quick reminder, when we discuss the K-8 realignment, we're referring to the change in which 5th grade will move out of our elementary buildings, creating 7 K-4 buildings, and then reconfiguring our current middle schools to have 1 5-6 building or center and 1 7-8 building. These changes will be effective for the 28-29 school year. And while that's 3.5 years from now, we certainly know that we have a lot of planning to prepare for the change. So tonight, our team will focus on the programmatic recommendations for each of the 3 levels, specifically K-4, 5-6, and 7-8. And so as you see on the agenda that will guide our presentation this evening, the programmatic overview that's going to be shared, we're starting with a brief introduction. We're going to go into those programmatic recommendations, and we're going to share some of the community feedback with you, that community feedback process that we have. So certainly in everyone's mind might be the question of how we came to the programmatic recommendations or the information that we're going to share with the board and the public this evening. And this slide really speaks to the collaborative efforts of hundreds of stakeholders in the East Penn community and how we've involved, again, many voices in making these decisions. Specifically, for the past 8 months, we've had approximately 10 subcommittees that are composed of educators and leaders, and they've been meeting to design critical aspects of the K-8 program, really looking at a comprehensive view of all areas of a child's educational program. The information has often been vetted by our department leaders to ensure that those programmatic decisions that we're making are clearly articulated across all levels K-12, not stopping just with the 7-8 building. In addition, we've had community stakeholder groups, and you're going to hear a little bit more about that process later in the presentation. But those community stakeholder groups, again, represent parents of East Penn students at all levels in the organization, and they've provided us with some great valuable feedback on our recommendations that we're sharing this evening. And finally, these recommendations have been continually discussed by a steering committee that includes, and tonight we are going to hear from several representatives from our steering committee who are going to go through the programmatic recommendations. The final piece that I want to share before we jump into the K-4 overview is that we appreciate that there is certainly more programmatic planning that's going to continue over the next several years. The information that we're sharing this evening represents the critical program features that will continue to guide future decisions, as well as the facility design that the board and the public will hear about coming this spring. So at this point, I'm excited to turn things over to Mr. Sam Hafner. He's currently the principal at Jefferson Elementary, and he's going to share with us an overview of the K-4 recommendations.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to talk specifically regarding some of the kindergarten through fourth grade recommendations. As we talk about our schedule, it's important to note this past summer we revised our current elementary schedule. And the revised schedule that we are currently using right now, we plan to maintain and implement when we move to the kindergarten to fourth grade model in a few years. One of the biggest changes in this schedule is we went from what I need, to now scheduling intervention and enrichment blocks in both content areas of English language arts as well as mathematics. And this is huge for our schedule and for our students and staff. So now we have 2 separate scheduled blocks where students can receive either support and/or enrichment in English language arts as well as mathematics. On top of this, with our schedule, the schedule also provides an opportunity for our reading interventionists at the buildings to meet with all their intervention and enrichment groups, kindergarten through 5th grade. And it's also important to note, as we talk about this, what we refer to I&E, just as we refer to what I need to win as an acronym. At the elementary level, we refer to intervention and enrichment, those blocks now, as I&E. It's important to note that no students will miss core instruction during these scheduled blocks of either, intervention and/or enrichment for both English language arts as well as mathematics. So again, no one is missing core instruction. And that is one of the revisions in this kindergarten through, as of right now, obviously kindergarten through 5th grade schedule. But like I said, we plan to maintain this schedule, implement the same schedule when we move to kindergarten to 4th grade. As you can see, we have 4 specials currently. And the elementary schedule operates on a day cycle 1 through 5. So obviously, once every 5 days, the students will not receive, they will not have a special. And our 4 specials as of right now: art, music, wellness, fitness, also known as physical education, and then when in the classroom for health lessons, health, as well as library. We are also proposing, when we move to the kindergarten through 4th grade model, that we implement a 5th special titled Innovate. In a few minutes, when I turn the microphone over to Mr. Dylan Phillips, he is going to, or Mr. Dylan Peters, Mr. Dylan Peters, he will speak to you about what Innovate is and what it could look like. As we do this planning and we have our meetings and we talk to different people, sometimes you find some unintended bonuses along the way. Some of the unintended bonuses with our scheduling and going to a K-4 model, as well as this revised schedule. Currently, you have 2 buildings that do not have a separate cafeteria from a gymnasium, which makes it problematic for scheduling. So those 2 buildings obviously are Jefferson and Lincoln. So in the days where we have wellness and fitness in our building, we have the challenge of squeezing 6 periods of 40-minute classes, as well as getting 6 grades through the lunchroom in the same room. So where does that come into scheduling? Those 2 buildings, Jefferson and Lincoln, when they are creating their master building schedules every summer, instead of starting with core instruction or starting with our intervention and enrichment blocks or formally WIN, we have to start with logistics and facilities and start with making sure that we have our wellness fitness blocks in, as well as lunch schedules, and then build backwards. So this will, when we move to a kindergarten through 4th grade schedule, and realignment, this will give those buildings specifically a little more breathing room and a little more flexibility, where when we do build our master schedules, there's going to be some flexibility, and now we can actually build with the importance of core instruction and our I&E first, instead of facilities and logistics, and building backwards. So that was one unintended bonus. Another unintended bonus, obviously, if we do move to a 5th special with that Innovate, that is also going to provide our teachers with 40 extra minutes a week. And that will provide opportunities for more team time, more time for our PLCs, more time for data meetings, more time for teacher preparation. And as we all know, time is in any teacher schedule, especially an elementary teacher schedule, is a valuable resource. And if we have 40 minutes extra for some of those items, that, not only will the teachers benefit, but it's also going to be a benefit for the students as well. At this time, I am going to turn it over to Mr. Dylan Peters, as he's going to talk to you about the proposed 5th special Innovate.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Hafner. I'm excited to share about Innovate, our K through 6 proposed special. The name Innovate was chosen through a collaborative committee process built upon the 8 pillars or foundations, including tech and engineering, our entrepreneurship and career, environmental literacy and sustainability, and innovation and design. The 4 of the pillars directly align to the teals and steels, while the other 4 pillars really associate with the BCIT standards and the ISTE standards. The curriculum we would be developing through potential teachers, as well as the instructional coaches and curriculum supervisors. The tech and engineering and environmental literacy and sustainability will be assessed on the 5th grade PSSAs. For that reason, we hope to, when we design the curriculum, to address both the K through 2 band and the 3 through 5 band in our K through 4 curriculum. That way we can assure that all students have received the needed materials by the time they get to 5th grade. In addition, we also want to include a spiral review that would be consistent throughout the units of study, and this will ensure consistency across all 7 elementary buildings, and it prepares students for a unified transition to the 5-6 building. And to talk more about the 5-6 building and related arts, I'm going to turn it over to our curriculum supervisor, Dr. Murphy.
Good evening. So as we transition to the 5-6 building recommendations, we are going to continue the discussion about the related arts, as Mr. Peters said. So in designing the related art structure for this new setting, so this entirely new environment, the committee aimed to sort of strike a balance between what is developmentally appropriate for our younger learners that we're now introducing into this setting, while also maintaining opportunities that are currently available to our 6th graders. So based on feedback from the committee, committee, we determined that we wanted to create one 50-minute related arts period each day. This extended time, so currently students only have like 42 minutes in a related arts at the middle level and a 40-minute special at the elementary. So this extended period of time was designed to allow our younger students to more appropriately acclimate to and fully engage in these learning experiences in these very hands-on courses, while also maintaining the instructional blocks of time that are necessary to teach foundational skills in our core classes. And Mrs. Yencho is going to talk about our core classes in just a minute. So the students will rotate through 6 related arts subjects. So art, family consumer science, music, wellness, fitness, health, and innovate. Innovate will integrate the standards from the current technology education or tech ed courses as well as our computer courses. So since Innovate will instruction will begin now in the elementary schools, students actually entering this 5-6 building will be bringing with them a much stronger foundation than they had in previous years. Each related arts course is going to run on a 28 to 30 day cycle for consecutive days, providing consistency in the daily instruction and minimizing transition through the school day, which, as you can appreciate, is really important for those younger learners who are learning to transition independently. Additionally, the schedule is going to allow for band, chorus, and orchestra to take place during the school day, which is preserving those valuable musical experiences for our students. And then finally, while library is not actually scheduled as a standalone course in the 5-6 building, our libraries will remain an essential part of the school environment. So classroom teachers will continue, as they do now, to schedule time in the library and with the librarian. The librarians will continue to support students by providing research resources, texts, databases, and then ultimately fostering independent reading habits. So now to talk a little bit more about our core instruction, I'm going to pass it off to Mrs. Yencho.
Good evening. I'm really excited to share that our new 5th and 6th grade building will be a unique program, distinct from both traditional elementary and middle school models. While the planning team has incorporated some key middle level opportunities, the overall structure is designed specifically to support those developmental needs of our 5th grade and 6th grade students, as Dr. Murphy had stated. Our 5-6 building is going to be focused on a house system, which will include approximately 8 teams of 5th graders and 8 teams of 6th graders. Each team will have 3 core subject area teachers, ELA, math, and 1 combined science and social studies teacher. Within those teams, there's going to be 4 green teams and 4 gold teams at each grade level. Each team will support approximately 70 to 80 students, placing approximately 22 to 27 students in each homeroom. The student day will be split up into those 3 85-minute blocks for ELA, math, and science and social studies. It will also include the 1 50-minute exploratory block, as Dr. Murphy just discussed. There will also be 4 lunch periods, 30 minutes each, and a 35-minute flex block attached to either the front end or the back end of the lunch period. While we haven't decided at this time what this flex time will specifically be, it will allow us time to dive into advisory opportunities with a focus on social emotional learning activities, counseling lessons, and even the team or house community building activities. As stated, our math and ELA courses will be 85 minutes in length per day. This larger block of time will allow for our students who need intervention and or enrichment support in reading or math to receive these services in small groups at either the beginning or the end of the math or ELA areas. This is a shift from our current practices at the middle level, where we are pulling students either from an exploratory and or social studies classes to receive these interventions. Next, Dr. Thatcher is going to discuss our 85-minute science and social studies block, as well as our specialized programming.
Good evening, everybody. So as Mrs. Yencho described, we have 1 combined teacher for science and social studies, which is a shift for us as a district. And I want to note that while it's 85 minutes, that will be split between the two courses, which is an increase in instructional minutes for both of those courses from the 5th grade, while it's a maintaining of about the same 40-ish minutes for our 6th graders. So the ask really did come from the committee as they were really marinating on how the teachers would be split up. May have been times in the past where it was an ELA and a social studies and a math and a science that were typically combined, but the committee felt very strongly that no one teacher should have to carry 2 tested subjects. So by combining science and social studies, that teacher then just has science as the tested subject, while ELA would have ELA and math would have math. Another benefit that we have for combining in this way is that it does allow them to sort of flex the time as needed. So if you need more time for, let's say, a project that you're working on in social studies, if it's an activity-based lesson, you can use additional time. If you have a lab that you're doing in science where you might need to flex the time for some lab setup or cleanup, or for the lab activity itself, you have that capability within that 85-minute block to determine how you will use the time on a daily and weekly basis to meet the needs of the learners in the class. So another reason that it was important that we didn't want to necessarily combine ELA with social studies is because, or math with social studies, although that's more of a rare combination, is because of the intervention that students are receiving in ELA and math. So there may already be some time where students are not engaging, and we wouldn't necessarily want to take additional instructional minutes from math and ELA in that way. And so in terms of the specialized programming for students who have IEPs, currently some students may go to different buildings outside of their home school, depending on what program they're in. In the 5, 6, and 7, 8 buildings, we're happy to say that we will be able to offer all of our specialized programs within each of the buildings. I'm going to hand it over to our IR principal, Mr. Roof, and he's going to share the 7, 8 recommendations.
So to kind of echo what Mrs. Yancho stated, this process requires essentially reimagining or rethinking what these buildings will look like. From a 7-8 perspective is a little different of a lift compared to what happened in the 5-6, because they're kind of building an entire new program that is dissimilar from the K4 and then dissimilar from what the 7-8 looked like. So when we brought our teams of folks together, we talked a lot about what were the things that are working, what are the things that we don't believe are working, and how can we improve those in what will be the remaining 7-8 building. So in terms of like a hugely reimagined, you'll notice here that it's not significantly reimagined. So from a core perspective, we are maintaining a 9-period schedule. There is one real area of concern that has kind of really been something that across content areas and across multiple different groups that we identified as a situation of where are we going to be placing reading interventions if we have the ability to reimagine what the schedule would look like. And then also looking at course offerings and the classic course offering that, we've heard from really how can we expand the access to world languages across the school district and expand that access earlier, because the research will say the earlier you're accessing these things, the more successful your outcomes are, and it's also providing successful outcomes across different content areas. So what we do in order to kind of remediate that issue, and like Mrs. Yancho stated, right now students will come out of social studies if you need a reading intervention. Well, we redid that process where in 7th grade you would essentially have a 3-tiered approach. If a student requires very little based on their screening and data support, and they've met they've met the goals within the screening process, they would be able to take an Intro to World Language class, which would provide them an overview of the 3 courses that we would have. So they'd take a trimester-based rotation on world language. A student that needs reading support but does not necessarily get into a specific classification and need a reading intervention would continue to take a reading course to kind of get those last bits of support. And then students that would qualify through the screening process for a reading intervention would take that intervention. So it creates a 3-tiered system in 7th grade. That continues into 8th grade, where right now in 7th grade across the district, we pull students out of social studies in 7th and world language in 8th. 8th grade, it would shift from this model from a reading to the world language. So students would be able to either take the Intro to World Language class for students that did not take that in 7th grade. They would take, students that took that class in 7th grade would take World Language 1, but they would have a much greater ability to understand what they're selecting, because right now students are selecting it based off of, well, my brother or sister took this class, or my mom or dad took this class. They'll actually get an opportunity to know what is there, or they'll take a reading seminar intervention or a reading seminar lab in 8th grade. So it really maintains a tiered system approach, as opposed to right now, we're in a position where we don't necessarily have a solution. So like right now in 8th grade, if a student sees growth over the course of their 8th grade school year, we're not going to drop them into Spanish 1 like right now after we've done screening, because it makes no sense. Whereas we'd be able to put them in a trimester-based reading intervention. They've shown the growth. We'd be able to move them into that appropriate side. So that maintains the remaining classes of science, social studies, math, and English alongside those. From a related arts perspective, the related arts program really remains the same, with adjustments as we go through, like what is the curricular planning process, because several of these courses are in the curricular pipeline to have updated curriculums over the course of this process, which is kind of happening side saddle to this. And there will continue to remain a 12-week and a 9-week rotation. So students have a very robust related arts process, and determining where those classes will fall, there will potentially be, and we shared with our teams, and we got a lot of feedback, potentially looking at where certain areas would lie in the 12-week or 9-week rotation. And that's really to be determined as we continue to work with the teams. From a functional standpoint of what we're looking at, and it's very much a very similar process. So you have an ELA, math, science, social studies teacher with an anticipation of five teams per grade level. So if you look at, essentially, that's a combination of what is currently in existence at LMMS and IR combined. There are 2 teams per grade level at IR, 3 teams per grade level at LMMS. And then you continue to have, or the application of all of the additional specialized programs at a building, since the direction of this program is the 7-8 building would be at LERTA. So there are certain specialized programs there. There are certain specialized programs at IR. They would all be married then at LERTA. And I'm going to pass it over to Mrs. Kroll.
Good evening. We're going to move away from the academic programming recommendations to briefly highlight ways in which we intend to intentionally build community within our new 5, 6, and 7, 8 buildings. You may recall that we have previously discussed the house system model, and this is a model that is research-based, and it's intended to foster community. The intent is to build a positive school climate and culture, not only for students to benefit from, but also from staff to benefit. So imagining a house system, which we're still in the infancy stages of learning about as a team, but imagining a house system, the day-to-day functionings of the building would remain the same. Students would still be mixed during the day as they typically are in our current system, but it will give the opportunity for a house system affiliation to kick in for spirit events, for community service activities, for leadership potential of students, as well as school spirit engagement. One of the positives that we have identified very early on in this process of realignment is the ability to bring a cohort of students in the district together as early as 5th grade. And so we believe this idea of the house model system will encourage that community building long before students would reach their high school years, which would be a true benefit for our school district and our community as a whole. You may recall at a previous board meeting that we are sending a team of educators to Atlanta, and actually next week, to learn from the Ron Clark Academy, which is known for the house system model. And so our intent in going there is to learn best practices of an ideal house system model, and then bring back the pieces that we believe we can integrate into our system here at East Penn. Once we get back from that conference, we obviously intend to engage many other different parties in terms of the development of this as it continues to evolve. But we are excited for this learning opportunity, and we do believe, as Mrs. Yensho and Mr. Roof talked about, that these will be critical components to building community in our 5, 6, 7, 8 buildings. And we intend to explore the possibility of pushing a house system all the way down to our K4 buildings to create consistency K8. The other area that you'll see on the slide in front of you is this idea of decentralized student supports. The anticipated change would include a main office as you know it to stand today with your building principal, but then we would take a model of 2 separate administrative suites separated throughout the building, which would include assistant principal in each, would include school counselors, and other student supports like student advisors, school psychologists, your instructional specialist. The idea behind decentralizing these student supports is really a proactive measure to decrease response times of adults to students or teacher concerns throughout the building, and it naturally increases visibility for staff to students as well as for students to staff. The graphic you see, again, details some of those people who may be involved in the shuffle between administrative suites, but we look forward to developing that further and increasing that aspect of building community through visibility. So with that, I will ask Mrs. Carrie Oken to take the podium, and she'll talk about activities as we move forward with our 5, 6, and 7, 8 programming.
For athletics, activities, and the arts at both the 5, 6, and the 7, 8 building, first we are looking to offer intramurals to all students at the 5, 6 building during each of the 3 sports seasons. Currently, we are working on piloting this at both Lower Macungie and Ayer this school year and next, and through feedback and input, we'll continue to work on the structure for these intramurals. Additionally, we are recommending increasing not only the amount of clubs that will be offered, but also the variety of clubs offered at the 5, 6 building, while continuing to offer a comparable amount of clubs at the 7, 8 building, similarly to what is currently being offered. To increase the accessibility of these opportunities, we're exploring the possibility of increasing the number of days that the activity buses are being offered at both buildings. I will now turn it over to Rebecca George to talk about athletics and theater opportunities.
Thank you. Good evening. So you've heard a lot of information tonight, and my section is to talk a little bit about the middle school level sports and athletic school-sponsored activities. And we will be able to maintain the number of programs that we currently offer at Ayer and Lower Macungie middle schools. So with that, athletic facility enhancements, additions, doing a reconfiguration of the Lower Macungie campus will allow us the ability to maintain all of our existing programs we currently offer. The Athletic and Activity Committee continues to have discussions around how participants would be determined, and those discussions will continue. One note in particular I'd like to mention, and is that we do not plan to recommend that ability be one of the factors or criteria that, but rather we utilize something along the house model that was described just a few moments ago, or perhaps geographic by the elementary school that our kids attended. But those conversations are ongoing as we look for an equitable way to determine our team participants for our kids at the 7-8 building. Additionally, as it relates to our extracurricular art programs, we do plan to maintain the 2 theater productions that we currently offer now. So with that, I'd like to turn this back over to Mrs. Corolla, who will give an overview of community feedback.
Okay, so as mentioned previously at the beginning of the presentation, there have been many voices that have contributed to the conversation that we've brought forth today before all of you and the public. Parent representation is a really critical component of this work, and we are pleased to continue meeting with our 4 community focus groups this year. As you may recall, we have a K-4 group, a 5-6 group, a 7-8 group, as well as a K-8 group. All of the groups preview the same information, but the lens through which they're looking varies and differs, and so some of the feedback we get is different depending on the group we're working with. The second meeting of these groups was held about a month ago prior to this presentation, and we were able to preview all of these recommendations with our parents as a part of that. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, but we also asked for input on things that we should further consider. And so those further considerations really helped guide us in preparing the presentation for this evening and also informing us of next steps as we continue to work with our subcommittees and develop further these recommendations about the things that are most important to our community and that the things that they're really interested in. The community-focused feedback groups will meet again prior to our April school board meeting, and so they'll have the opportunity to preview the schematic designs and offer us feedback and input as we continue to move through this process. So their input has been extremely valuable, and we look forward to the continued collaboration with that stakeholder group. And at this time, I'll open the floor for questions.
All right, well, thank you very much to the team that spoke tonight. Nicely transitioned. I'll now open the floor to the board for questions and comments. Mr. Kelly.
I have some questions. First off, I want to say thanks. This is I appreciate all the work that you guys have done and the presentation and just the obvious research that you guys have put into this. I think it looks amazing. I do, and I know we spoke about this. I have a question, and maybe Mr. Roof, who spoke about it, the world language course. When you say it's a trimester course, does that mean that it's a full year course, or it's happening one of the 3 trimesters?
So the exploratory would be each trimester you do, like you would do Spanish for one trimester, German, and then French. But the exploratory course, for certain students, it could be offered as a full year. I believe we also talked that some students could potentially, in that 8th grade, they could move into a trimester-based rotation.
So is that, so I guess I'm curious to this, to be honest with you, in a sense where I don't see how it applies to career readiness as much as maybe the Innovate course does, and the engagement for the students in it. And so I'm, not to take a negative stance on this, but I'm wondering if it's been explored to be a quicker course for the students.
So right now, the career readiness standards, and Mike's not here, but they're being addressed largely in computers. So I do know that with Steels and the change in Steels, obviously there's a much greater emphasis on the requirements in Steels that are happening in Tech Ed. So Tech Ed carries a much more significant load in terms of what's being assessed on the 8th grade science PSSA, as well as health, as well as the science classes. From a career readiness standpoint, we are hitting a lot of our career readiness standards in the computers course.
Yeah, I did see that. I mean, you guys are hitting down to like keyboarding. And, I mean, it looks awesome. But I just, I also kind of wonder if there's any data to support. Of course, there's data to support that the earlier the better for language. But in terms of a program like this, specifically introducing languages for the first time in 8th grade or 7th grade.
It would be 7th under this plan, yeah.
If there's been any data to support that the engagement is better for students that have taken this, or the choices, our
yeah,
outcomes. I'm wondering if we have any data to support the outcomes that you guys are looking at.
I don't have that with me right now, no.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kelly. Additional comments, questions? Ms. Bowman.
Yes, thank you all for the presentation. I have a few questions for each of the grade configurations. On grade K through 4, when you're introducing the Innovate, you mentioned that right now you have specials 4 days a week, and then there's a blank day where there's no special, and this kind of fits into that. But I'm somewhat aware that every time we add something, we have to subtract something. So what's getting bumped when we add that? Like, what are we not teaching in order to fit in the Innovate class?
So right now, depending on the different grade levels, teachers may use that for extra writing time. They may use that to use more time for science. They may use it for a team time, for a buddy time. For example, we have buddies between the grade levels. So like fifth grade may come down and work with their kindergarten team. So it's kind of a potpourri of different things depending on where we are in each trimester. So that's giving you an honest answer of what's going on.
But
It's a good question.
It's basically like a flex time.
Yeah,
that the
it's a
educators
bit of a
use.
flex time. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then in order to add the Innovate, are we going to need new staff, or will that staff will they be people that are already in place?
We anticipate that we will need additional staff, and we have planned for that as part of our long-range planning for the realignment.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and then you had mentioned, I was confused about this, and I might have heard you wrong, that it is going to be assessed on PSSAs. Is that not? Can you just explain a little bit about how that is, that we don't have it now and it's not being assessed on PSSAs, but then we have it and then it is?
Yeah, so with Steels, PSSAs the field test will be this year where it's changing. It's transitioning from fourth grade to fifth grade. And with that, 25% of the assessment will be tech and engineering.
Okay.
ELS is included in the life science portion, so we don't have exact numbers on that, but that could be another 10 to 12% of the PSSA. So you're looking at roughly 37% of that PSSA could be taught in that Innovate special.
And it sounds like some of it would also be taught in some of the core instruction as well.
The science class would take the majority of that test. And since it's cumulative, you could be looking third, fourth, and fifth grade science on that fifth grade test.
Okay, great. I think this is a great addition. I was just wanted to understand those particulars. And then at the 5-6 level, I think, and maybe I'm wrong about this, did sixth grade used to have tech ed, and is that getting bumped up? Is Innovate replacing tech ed at that grade level?
It's basically being combined into one thing, which is Innovate, correct?
Okay, and so.
And they currently have tech ed.
And so are they learning some of the things that they would have learned, and in addition, like what are they not learning, or can you explain how that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we need more time to develop that curriculum. That's coming down the road kind of in next steps. But yes, it will be kind of a combination of things that they're already doing along with the STEELS standards and everything that we're bringing along together with Innovate. So the specifics of that will come later as we bring people together.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then I think I had a similar question. Before I get to that one, you talked about library. Can you just tell me what you're doing now and then what you're not going to be doing? It sounds like there's no library. I mean, there is a library, but I don't know. Just explain to me what the difference is.
Sure. So at the elementary level, so currently K-5, every day 2, a class goes to the library and there's a library curriculum, and then in addition to book selection. Once students go to our middle schools, library is no longer a scheduled course. It then is booked through the core classes. So like a social studies course might book the library to work with the librarian on a research project, and so on. So essentially, our 5-6 building library is going to function the way our middle school libraries currently function.
Makes sense. Okay, I got you now. Okay, thank you. And then 7-8, and maybe this happened earlier and it's not a change, I'm not sure. Or did we drop communications in favor of reading, or?
Yeah, so starting this school year, communications transformed into a reading course.
Okay.
And essentially in 7th grade, ELA and the reading course have split up the responsibilities for instructing the core standards.
Okay, that's great. I just couldn't, okay.
Yep.
And then what was the thought process for keeping tech ed the same in 7-8 instead of switching that over to the Innovate as well?
Well, I can't speak specifically. From a developmental standpoint, the use of heavy machinery, and while a planer might not be considered heavy machinery, and some other radial arm saw and bandsaw, these are things that are, and I've been in there when they're using it. Watching kids use a bandsaw, unassisted is it's pretty frightening. So I would think that for a 5th grader, they'd be up on a stool to get to the bandsaw. So I think like a lot of it really comes down to that, and they are teaching, to Mr. Kelly's point, manufacturing careers are largely careers of the future, as much as people don't necessarily want to hear that. So keeping those like heavy integrated prep platforms in that course are really critical, while also then navigating some of the digital tools. So right now, in certain grades, they'll be designing and testing bridges using digital engineering programs, but then they're also using those tools to do what is traditional engineering design and development, to build a car, test it, put a CO2 canister in it, and blast it across the room, and decide why Mr. Kelly's car and my car, his car's faster than mine. So I think there's still like a real important hands-on component, and I also think there are eligible content standards that Innovate is hitting that are different, frankly, from the ones that the 7th or 8th grade class have to hit.
Okay. So I think I understand how they're different, but what was the reason for not continuing any of the Innovate stuff into the 7 and 8?
Yeah.
I think I can help a little bit. So essentially, if you were to just physically look at the standards for business and for the new science standards and the tech standards on paper, as you move up the grade level, the amount of standards goes like this. So while in the elementary level, it is very feasible and doable to combine those into one like authentic course, once you get to the older grades, the nuance in those standards really requires those standalone courses.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And then the last question I have is about the activities. I'm just curious if we're going to be trying to do any co-ed activities versus having them all separated. And then I have a question about what you said about ability.
For the activities, they would be intramural for the intramurals at the 5-6 building.
Yeah.
So some of them would be co-ed depending on what sports we offer and
Okay,
which opportunity and how much interest we have in those.
And what was the reason for moving away from ability? Because we moved back to it by the high school level. I'm just curious, like, why we're having a difference at the two levels.
Is that for the athletics at the 7-8 building?
I think I can. I think I can help out here. So the process in terms of having tryouts for athletics for PIAA sports will continue. The clarification came in that in having two teams at the 7-8 building, again, in which students who are interested still try out to participate, we will not be creating we will not be creating a team of the most skilled athletes. Like if we're talking, let's say, our middle school track, we will not have a team of the fastest runners or the fastest or those who can throw the farthest, right? And then another secondary team who perhaps who are not as skilled in that particular sport. We will be creating two teams that have been formed in an equitable manner,
That they can compete against each other.
so that they are equitably competitive with each other and with other middle schools in the PIAA level.
Okay, that makes sense. I misunderstood what was said then. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bowman. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, this is all great stuff. I don't have any concerns, but I just had a couple of questions. And since I had a line of thinking or questioning similar to what we were just discussing, I understand and appreciate the moving away of one super talented varsity and one trying to get there a JV. Like I completely appreciate that, because I imagine sending the Lower Macungie track team to some other schools would just be overwhelming, and then both sides of the competition wouldn't get the value out of that experience. I know that, at least to begin, we're talking about not changing the number of PIAA sports. However, I'm curious, and in all of my questions, if I'm getting too far into the weeds, please stop me. But, and this may be one of them, if further down the lane we are looking at a larger body of students to draw from, is there a potential for another sport that we don't currently offer to be added that can draw, I don't know, like, for example, we're not talking about putting in a pool, but if we don't have a middle school swim team, but if we had a bigger middle school to draw from, is that something we could potentially add? Not swimming specifically, but golf, archery, anything that students might want to bring and bring an advisor to that.
I think the possibilities are there. If we look over the history of the last 2 years, we've added girls wrestling. That's now a PIAA sport. That's been added at the middle school level as well. We're on the verge of flag football becoming a sport and school-sponsored PIAA as well. I think the possibilities are there. It'll depend on what the league sponsors and what other schools are sponsoring so that you actually have teams to compete against. You brought up swimming. If we don't have any other middle school swim teams, we're not going to be able to form those kind of programs. So it really, I think the possibilities are there, and as long as we have the interest and the support to field those teams.
Okay, good. So that was my first question. And when you said we're not changing the number of teams, it's almost more like we're not reducing the number of teams. We're keeping what we have currently with the potential to expand if the need is there and if the demand is there.
Right, correct.
Right, okay. Speaking of athletics, also activities, I'm thinking about these teams where we have now 2 separate teams. We also have 2 theater productions. Have we thought about the logistics? Maybe this is coming when we talk about facilities later in the spring, but have we thought about the logistics of having 2 theater productions, let's say, running at the same time? Is it going to be the same show, 2 different shows? If we have 2 different companies that are going to be performing, we only have 1 stage. How does that logistically work out?
Well, I think the thought process is that it might not be at the same time. Maybe we have to stagger that a little bit, depending upon the space. But we do feel, the committee felt strongly about maintaining that, and we felt that we'd be able to do that. As far as the sports, I mean, you'll see those changes and recommendations through the facility section of this project.
For the house system, I'm assuming that's by alphabet, correct? So families would remain in the same house, or is it by grade level?
So not necessarily. That's still yet to be determined. We would anticipate that whatever house that you're assigned to initially, that you would carry that through for the duration of the time that we have the house system model. But we have not yet determined whether that would be family-based alphabetically or some other means.
Okay. And then I may have missed this in the 5-6 plan. The lunch in recess, is that 50 minutes or is that 30? I'm sorry, I didn't hear recess in the 5-6.
30 minutes altogether.
30 minutes for both of those pieces. If I remember correctly, and it's been a couple years, but I believe that period is 40 minutes now. Is that true?
It is, but I can tell you, I feed 400 kids right now at LMMS in a lunch, and we get it done in about 30 minutes. And if we front load some going out to recess while some are eating and then flip-flop, we can get it done in 30 minutes.
So I would want to, maybe caution is too strong of a word, but I would worry that our 5th graders, that typically 5th graders get a full recess, aren't trying to squeeze in both their lunch period and their recess period in the same block of time. I know you talked about that 35-minute flex time, and you mentioned SCL as all part of that. So maybe that all overlaps and there's something there we can work with. But I think it's really important to get our kids up and moving. Structured, great, but definitely need to be up and moving.
Yep.
So
Appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Yep. And then the last one, this is probably more into the weeds than anything. Curious about acceleration opportunities for students who are in 6th grade and going to 7th grade, or who are currently in 6th grade and may be interested in a 7th grade offering. My thought in that was with Mr. Kelly's question at the very beginning about starting world languages in 7th grade. If there was a student that had an identified strength and a need in 6th grade in literature or reading ability or what have you, would there be an option for that student to potentially try some of that exploratory option by virtually participating in a class or something like that from IRE over to LMS?
So that topic is definitely on the docket of things to continue discussing, and that still needs further conversation. We have made no decisions at this point in time. As mentioned, this really is just a general broad overview, but now the work will start to dig in a little bit deeper into what those very specific program options for individual students look like. Because at the end of the day, we want to continue to meet the needs of all of our learners in the same, if not better, ways moving forward into realignment.
Understood, and I fully understand that some of the questions I'm coming up with wouldn't necessarily have an answer tonight, but just things to think about that as we're going closer and closer and honing some of those details, we can take a look at that further down the line. So
absolutely,
that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Ford.
Sure. Thank you for the presentation. Very exciting. I was getting excited with you. Just a couple of questions real quick. One, I just wanted to ask, you were talking about the activity buses, the potential of adding more, which sounds like a great thing to offer more opportunity for participation. And I was just curious, what are some of the barriers to having that happen?
At this point, we're in early conversations with our transportation company, STA, and we're considering all options, what the routing would look like, how many buses would be needed, the cost involved with that. And so the goal would be to increase from 2 times a week to 4 times a week, but we're still very early on in the discussion with STA.
Okay. And then my other question has to do with your visit to the Ron Clark Academy, which sounds really exciting. I'm very familiar with the academy. I wanted to know what are some of the areas you're interested in diving into, and then my second part of that was, do you have any interest in their point system that they use?
So there are a lot of facets of their program that we are interested in learning about. And I think one of the areas is just even the enthusiasm that the students have to go and participate in these house models. They are one of the premier learning opportunities when it comes to the house system. And so if you have the opportunity to look at it online, it's pretty incredible. I don't know that we could replicate it in its entirety in the way that they present it, but we are really hoping to gain some valuable insight on ways that we can bring that excitement into our building, that sense of community. The other thing, they foster a very positive, supportive environment for their students, and they offer a lot of student leadership opportunities to take ownership. And so again, as we think about developmentally preparing students and pro-social programming, building those soft skills in students as early as our elementary buildings to take ownership in the learning process and building community amongst each other.
Yeah, love it. Sounds great. Can't wait to hear more. One last thing. For the Innovate, there was no slide, correct?
It was listed on the K4 slide just as one of those, the third block on that slide.
Gotcha. Because I felt like I wanted to hear more.
To be continued, for sure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Whitney.
Yeah, well, sorry, I'm going to ask you to continue right now, but I'll keep it very high level. So I am very curious and interested in the Innovate course. I mean, this seems like a real potential sea change for us in terms of what we're offering these learners, and I think it's fabulous, and these are all incredibly important skills and areas of study that they will need. So just a couple of smaller scale questions. What are I guess the question is, what are the overarching goals on the K-4 level and the 5-6 level? What do we want our students to be coming out of this Innovate course equipped with, to take to the next level?
So I think that's such a great question. There's a lot of answers to that, right? But I think what we really want is to foster, when you look at our portrait of a grad and you look at those attributes that we want as a district, I feel like this is such a great opportunity to embrace that, to get them to be curious in class, to get them to ask questions, to think critically, and to be creative in their solutions that they're finding, but also those problems. So I feel like it's a good opportunity. We say career readiness in there because we feel like these are really valuable skills for the students to learn. but also to teach those things that we can't necessarily teach in class explicitly. So like the tech and engineering standards, even though we're doing some of that inside of our science curriculum currently, really teaching them the process and going through the engineering design process. So we want them to get exposed to as much as possible, especially at our kindergarten, first and second grade. Those students are extremely curious by nature. So kind of embracing that and just really getting them to think outside the box. I think that's an important thing, so.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't agree more, and that's music to my ears, so thank you. So we asked the question already about staffing, and we know we will need additional staffing. Do we anticipate needing additional space, equipment? And I know we're not there into the curriculum yet.
Right,
but
right.
what are
I
we
do
thinking?
think that at our K through 4 buildings, I think if you walked into a classroom today, a standard maybe math and science classroom, you would see a lot of them do have those makerspace areas, those tinker stations. So I feel like at a K through 4 model, the innovate is going to happen in what would look like a typical elementary classroom. The setup may be different. It may be a little bit more flexible seating. There may be a little bit more cardboard sitting around and that kind of stuff. But I feel like in our planning, that the K4 model would look very similar to a typical classroom, where the 5-6 might look a little bit more like a tech ed or a business and computers classroom. So there'd be extra technology or other materials being used.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yep.
A couple of other quick questions not related to Innovate. Can you just clarify for me, I'm sorry, the chorus band orchestra in 5-6 says included in the school day. Does that take the place of the music special, or how does that work exactly?
Yes, in this model, and again, we're sort of like creating something new because this is not the way it functions currently at the elementary or the middle level. The way it will work is a student, if they opt into an ensemble, so if they choose to do chorus, band, or orchestra, they will not have their general music course, and it'll take the place of their general music course. So right now at the elementary level, if a student is involved in instrumental music, that actually happens majority outside the school day. And then in the middle level, students participate in their ensemble during 9th period. So this is sort of like a hybrid of both of those models.
But if the music is only running 28 to 30 days, is that then when they are participating?
Yeah, so again, we're kind of getting in the weeds, but essentially we would strategically schedule when those ensembles happen so that they would fall around what would be like your general concert times. And then at other times during the school year, those music teachers would be teaching general music classes and or their targeted lessons.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then just a question about the intervention, the I&E time. And this is just a question really about what happens now. What happens to the students that don't need intervention during that time?
So at the elementary school, when we introduced I&E time this year, the model really was meant to be an extension of our core. So essentially, students who are not receiving what we would consider a standard protocol intervention and or not receiving direct enrichment are receiving additional practice with core content. So rather than essentially, we're meeting them where they are. So if they are performing at grade level, we're providing them additional practice with grade level material.
Okay. And I know that we're coming up on a review of our gifted program and the ways that we offer gifted education. Is this all going to be related to the I&E time? I mean, we're going to look at that holistically?
I believe there's more to come in that conversation, yes.
Thank you. One last thing, and it's more of a comment than a question, and it's a very small soapbox that I'm going to stand on. The term related arts doesn't hit me the right way, and I think it's because actually it hits me the same way that the term soft skills hits me. And as a former arts and humanities teacher and practitioner, I'm a little allergic to the term soft skills because I think it's very reductive. To me, I think those are human skills, and I think they're incredibly important and should be, and I know soft skills, everybody says it, and it's, be that as it may. But related arts also seems to me a little bit reductive. So we're like, well, we have the real stuff and then the related stuff. So I'm just going to make a recommendation to maybe reconsider that name. That's all. Thanks. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Whitney. Additional questions or comments? Mr. Jankowski.
Thank you. No questions. They've all been adequately asked, just comments. So first of all, I appreciate the presentation you put together today. I think it's a very thoughtful roadmap for what we can expect with the realignment. You're clearly taking the feedback from the stakeholder groups and incorporating that. So I just ask that you continue doing that, listening to what is being said or asked, and just ensuring that, you know, all students of all abilities needs are being adequately addressed so that no one gets left behind. But again, thank you for you know, what I hope the future holds.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jankowski. Any additional comments or questions? Mr. Kelly?
I had a quick question. I really like the house system idea, and I currently work in a house system at the high school. I'm wondering, are there any districts in our area at this level, 5, 6, 7, 8, that do the house system, that currently work within the house system?
I think there are many variations of house models and systems that you would find it, you could find it locally, and some may look similar to what we embark on our journey of creating, may look slightly different. I know for a fact it's often offered at the high school level in some of our more local districts, but I do think it's also, it can be combined in tandem with some of the PBIS work that's already happening in our K through 8 programming, that we could do a combination. And when Ms. Ford asked that question about the point system, I neglected to answer that, but that's where I see a correlation or a connection happening in terms of the way that we structure PBIS and the way that students are earning tokens or points or zings. Potentially we can embed that into the middle school model, which then could be replicated in a house system. So a very long-winded answer to say, I think some of our existing structures already lend themselves to a house model. It's just branding it a little bit differently and maybe becoming a little more involved with it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mainly ask, as we started the house system last couple of years, hearing some of the feedback from the counselors, that was kind of unforeseen difficulties of, like, you know, now all of a sudden, if we're doing it by grade, they have 600 juniors all at the same time going through the application process. Sure. So two counselors that are dealing with this, which could be the same type of thing where our 8th graders are going to 9th grade, and now we have a certain amount of counselors, maybe just 2 or 4, that are now all inundated with this process. So
I think that's a valid point. I will say that our current middle school structure, the counselors are divided by grade level currently. So our counselors have all 6th grade or all 7th grade or all 8th grade, and then they rotate through each year with those same groups of students. So we would look to maintain the relationships that counselors build with students. Whether we continue with the grade level model or an alphabetical model or so forth is yet to be seen, and more conversation with counselors to be had.
Okay, all right, thanks. I also had a question about the 85-minute blocks. Just they're long periods for kids, especially at this age, and I'm wondering what we're going to do to help that engagement through that whole block period.
Sure. I think first it's important to keep in mind that those 85-minute blocks also include an I&E time. So if I was if I'm a student and I'm going to my ELA class, the 85 minutes that I would be in that class, 30 of those minutes are part of the I&E time. So if I was in an intervention, I'm being pulled out. If I'm not in an intervention, I'm either pulled out or pushed in, depending on how the intervention functions. If not, I might be in some kind of station model. So there is like naturally built in transition times and like, I would say cognitive breaks in those transitions that happen within the period. So it's not like 85 minutes of direct instruction or of a lecture. It's blocked time because of that I&E. So that then leaves 55 minutes for the remaining core. And right now our, like for example, in fifth grade currently, our block is 120 minutes. So it's pretty comparable to what our teachers are working with right now.
Thank you. And then my last question might be for Rebecca George. I was just wondering with the intramurals, if there are other districts that in the area that also have the intramurals at those ages that our teams could play, or are they just playing, would they be playing like in-house? Would it be like, here, we're going to put together a basketball league and we're splitting the teams up? And
It would be in-house
okay.
for intramurals.
Okay, all right, thanks. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for those questions. Any additional? One more?
I just realized that I forgot to say thank you, and I really want to express my thanks, my gratitude to the many, many, many hours that it took to get us to this point. And behind these 10 slides, I know we're hundreds and hundreds of hours of human hours, and so I'm really grateful. This is obviously a big step forward for our district, and I'm truly appreciative that everybody's putting their best foot forward in planning this all out. So I know there's many people not in this room that also contributed, but thank you for the efforts.
Okay. Well, I'll just state, most of my colleagues, asked most of my questions or thoughts. We'll reiterate what Dr. Whitney just said, sincere gratitude for all the effort that's come in from the teams. I did want to emphasize a couple things. First of all, this Innovate class is very intriguing. And it's great to see how we're going to integrate that through, K through 6 and really try and tie things along and provide skills throughout those 7 years. I think it's great that we're adding a fifth special at the elementary level. I know that was a significant concern for our existing elementary staff to have that ability. So, I think it's gratifying to see that that's actually going to come to fruition. One small question. I know that as a district, we try and pay attention to that transition from elementary to middle school, then middle school to the high school. We are, adding an additional transition from the 5-6 to the 7-8. What building transition strategies are kind of baked into these programmatic changes to help the students, with these shifts?
The house system model is meant to ease the transition process. That's a component of the house system. So that, in addition to just really thoughtful and intentional programming between levels, we anticipate the need to further develop things that already exist in the district at transitional times to make sure that we are creating a transition from each building where students feel comfortable and supported, and families feel supported throughout that process.
Okay. All right. All right, well, thank you for that. I'll look forward to the next presentation related to what we're doing with our facilities.
As we transition to our next presentation, I just, I want to echo, I think Dr. Whitney described it really well in terms of expressing gratitude to all of the team members who were here this evening to be part of the presentation, those who are part of the decision-making but not here this evening. It certainly is a team that has dedicated many, many hours and has invested their heart, their soul, their educational expertise to reimagine and think about how we can provide enhanced opportunities for our students at all levels. So again, thank you to the team that's here and for the teams that continue to work behind the scenes as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, now we're warmed up for our next presentation.
You got 5 minutes now.
Next presentation is related to our multi-presentation series on the budget, and tonight we're going to hear about get an overview of the expenditures anticipated for the 25-26 school year. So I turn things over to Dr. Campbell to introduce.
gentlemen. Thank you. Okay. Okay.
I'll start off with just a brief introduction again. As you see this evening, we are in our third of several budget presentations. Tonight's presentation is a follow-up really to our two weeks ago where we learned about anticipated revenues. And tonight we're going to focus on those projected expenditures for the 25-26 school year. You can see the additional presentations that are coming. I, in particular, will point out the March 24th and the April 14th presentation because that is where we will get into the priorities in much greater detail. You'll hear reference tonight to budgetary priorities, new proposed expenditures. Again, the purpose of tonight's presentation is not to go into a rationale of those particular priorities. In addition to this timeline that we have, we also just always think it's important to remind the board and the community in terms of our overarching goal of expanding those equitable educational opportunities while sustaining and maintaining the financial health of the organization. And you can see there the objectives, again, overarching one, maintaining existing programs, implementing tiered system of supports for students for both academics as well as behavior, social, emotional wellness. We recognize now more than ever, following up on our K-8 realignment plan, that those ongoing capital improvements and long-range planning for the facilities and technology are vital. And finally, a systematic phasing in of staffing to support that realignment plan again, so the timing of this really works out quite well.
Great. Thank you. Just a couple things before we continue with the presentation. I did pass around for board members copies of a printed copy of slides 7 and 8. I feel like it's really helpful to have those two slides, just sit them on the side because we're going to go through those. But we'll have several graphics and other slides on the to look at. So this will allow you to follow along in terms of the expenses, and we have that there. We've also included in the presentation, as we have in the past, I guess I should say, is we try to use a similar template from year to year. So you sort of like, it sounds similar from year to year, and it's not, we're jumping all over the place, and it's different from what you heard last year. So with that, we do include the revenues that we reviewed at the last meeting, just the basic summary of those. So they're there for your reference to refer back to, and you don't have to go back and find the previous presentation to find that information. So on slide 7, we do have a summary of the expenses, and if we take all of our expenses and sort of boil them down in terms of increases, we have about 19 categories where we can identify a majority of the increases in expenses from 24-25 to 25-26, and that's what we'll highlight tonight. And then everything else you'll see there's a relatively negligible increase in all the other areas. So with that, we'll sort of hop right in here with the note on the bottom of slide 8 that the capital project millage phase-in for the K-8 realignment plan has been incorporated into this draft. And that includes multiple elements such as staffing, the additional debt service moving forward, the use of capital reserve funds. All of those savings that we will realize from capital projects, et cetera. So all of that stuff has been incorporated into this plan, and there's multiple moving parts that affect this plan, but they have been incorporated. So diving right in, and we'll work our way right down through that expenditure, the expenditures on slide 7. And the first one is wages. And I listed here, just so you have an idea of scope, all of the various work groups that are included in the wage category. You can see that the overall percentage change is 3.86%. There's one thing that's slightly different this year from prior years. Due to a change in the professional staff collective bargaining agreement, there's an incentive for them to announce their retirement and the board to approve it earlier in the school year. So ordinarily in the past, we would be approving retirements in the April to May timeframe. And now you may recall that you're seeing those in the November, December, January timeframe. What that has allowed us to do is to incorporate the savings or the attritional savings from year to year into the budget earlier. So those savings that we'd ordinarily see in April or May have already been incorporated in and are reflective of that 3.86% increase year over year. The next category is group insurances, and the increase here of 8.95% is primarily the result of our medical insurance premiums. The premiums will be increasing 9.75% for 25-26. And the overall, that also includes medical and life insurance as well. The overall increase is slightly below that medical premium increase because we use real-time data. So if people are waiving insurance, there's some savings there that can be taken into effect. Also, we're sort of scaling back in terms of the grant-funded positions, and so we don't have as many medical insurance packages being offered. So that's the other reason you see a little bit of decrease from the 9.75% medical insurance premium increase for next year. I always like to use this presentation as an opportunity to remind the board and update the board on the fact that East Penn School District does participate in a consortium of schools for the purchase of group health insurance and group dental insurance. Collectively, the 10 Lehigh County school entities pool our purchasing power. We have 4,300 subscribers, which covers about 11,300 lives. And again, we leverage that to try to get the best rates possible for health insurance. You can see on slide 10 a multiple year history. And you can see sort of the ups and downs in terms of premium rate over the years. But on average, we've been at about a little over a 5% increase year over year. Again, on average. The plan that the consortium has negotiated is a unique plan that has something called a retrospective credit. So at the end of the year, dollars that haven't been spent on medical claims are put into a reserve fund for the benefit of the consortium. So if there was a year where there was more dollars spent than what had been paid in, it's pulled from that fund. And what that prevents is that sort of artificial inflation of the premium rate that you have in a true fully insured program where they need to make sure they've covered their cost. We're actually sort of insuring our cost, but it is not a self-insured plan. It's actually a fully insured plan with this retrospective credit feature. So on the next slide, you can see, on slide 11, you can see the balance that is in that account, that rate stabilization fund account. And you can see how that's changed over the years. You can see in around 2017, it got very high. So that's when you go back to slide 10, you can see there was action taken to decrease the premium rate to try to spend down a little bit of that. What we've been trying to accomplish is actually, let me back up. If you look at slide 10, you see a lot of changes up and down. If you look at slide 11, it's a much smoother curve. Those should actually be reversed. Our premium should be staying relatively constant, and the changes should be in the stabilization fund. So from year to year, we might put money in, we might spend it out, but what we're trying to do is stabilize our overall premium increase from year to year. That volatility to go from a negative 9% increase to then a 4% increase is very hard on a school budget to come up with the additional dollars to fund that. So we've been working on that. The 9.75% is reflective of a strategy to try to level those. The 5% in the previous year was also part of that strategy. So again, we're trying to get it closer and closer. So our annual increase is more like that 5%, that average, and we start to see more of the volatility or the changes in that stabilization fund. Very notable fact, which I shared with the board last year, is that 100% of the dollars that we pay in premium rate are used to pay claims. Because of a negotiation to get prescription rebates credited to our account, we actually get more in prescription rebates at this point than the cost for administrative fees. So there's actually, like, the insurance company is paying us to be their client, to be insured, which is rather unique, and it's a very good situation that we have. Moving forward, the next item on the slide is Social Security payments. You can see Social Security payments are a percentage of wages, so you can see that the increase in Social Security matches the increase in wages because there's no increase in the rate for Social Security. It's just simply increasing by virtue of the fact that wages are going up. After that, we have retirement. On slide 12, you can see the history of the retirement. Over the last 2 decades, we've seen some significant increases. However, over the last few years, it's been relatively stable. And so there's a very small 0.1% increase from 24-25 to 25-26, as well as obviously the increase in the overall wages for the district, which is yielding a little over a 4% increase in the retirement contributions. The next several items, the allocations, as I referred to them, I have a slide to just highlight what those are. These are our departments and buildings in the district and the funds that are allocated. With regard to facilities, we're seeing additional costs for our HVAC service contract, and then the electricity capacity costs. So you'll remember maybe 2 years ago, we talked about the fact that the electric cost was going up. That was the commodity. That was the actual electricity commodity. This is the delivery piece. This is the lines that get it to the building, and we're seeing significant increases in the transmission costs for next year. We do go out for bid. We do take measures to try to reduce those costs, but this is just an overall cost that's passed through, and because it's the delivery and not the commodity, it's pretty hard to get around. The next is the student activities department. What we've done here is, you may recall last year we had taken a look at moving our security services from an independent contractor that we were using, moving that in-house and trying to hire our own security staff. Unfortunately, the marketplace wasn't favorable for us to hire that security staff, so we did go out and identified a new third-party contractor to use for those security services. So this reflects really moving those funds from the wages category, which we saw above, and moving it back in as a contracted service, as well as establishing a student activities department budget. You'll recall that was a modified position, a new position, and so we wanted to establish a budget for that department. In the special education department, you'll recall that we've had significant challenges with regard to psychologists. One of the creative approaches that we've talked about is trying to engage interns to help us out. And so this is about $30,000 that we've put in to try to engage interns to help with some of those challenges. Again, trying to be creative and addressing some of the issues that we're seeing. Teaching and learning department, this is middle level science materials that address the new STEEL standards that were talked about in the previous presentation. The student services department, we implemented an emergency notification system and a visitor screening system using the PCCD safety and security grant funds. And a majority of those we were able to pick up through our regular operating budget, but a portion of those we didn't have capacity. And so these are additional funds to try to continue to use those programs, which have proven to be successful with regard to safety and security. The next item is the network infrastructure. You'll recall that we started a process last year of setting funds aside. I think I talked about that a little bit in the revenue presentation. Setting funds aside to make sure we're addressing our network infrastructure, keeping it current. Obviously, it's really important for security measures, et cetera. And so This is really just implementing the plan that we had laid out for the board last year, the next step and the next piece that we need to refresh, which is the network switches and the power infrastructure. And then finally, with regard to the building budgets, it's been quite some time. It precedes my time with the school district since we've purchased band uniforms. Band uniforms are a significant investment, and so we've budgeted for the purchase of band uniforms. They can come in usually $100,000+. Again, because of the nature of buying many of them and the quality that you get when you purchase those. The next item, actually I advanced the slide, but the next item is grant expenditures. And you'll recall when I presented the revenues, where we actually were seeing most of our grant revenues going down. And so it would beg the question, well, why are our expenditures going up? It's really a change in how we're spending those grant funds. Similar to an item I talked about earlier, in the past we were using grant funds for more personnel, and it's projected for next year we'd be purchasing more contracted services, supplies, those types of things, non-personnel items. I will say though, we just this week submitted a change request for one of our grants, which could adjust this. Again, looking at our personnel for next year, we're trying to leverage some of those grant funds for personnel. So while this was in our early draft of the budget, we likely could see this change if our change request is approved for that PCCD grant for next year. Okay, the next item is our charter and cyber school tuition line item. Again, you can see the increase of that. And I wanted to provide this slide so you could see just how this has been increasing year over year in terms of total cost. If we go to slide 15, you can see some data elements behind that, which includes the number of cyber and charter students enrolled, the regular student tuition rate, the special education student tuition rate, and then new as of January 1st, there is a separate cyber special education tuition rate, and that was approved last July, when the General Assembly passed the budget. This was a policy item that was approved. And so the budget numbers that you see, both the estimates for the current year and the projected numbers for 25-26, include that revised special education tuition rate in those projections. The next item is our contribution or tuition to the Lehigh Career and Technical Institute. Again, here's a slide so you can see the increases. That is on the agenda for this evening, and it included the copy of the budget, so that information was available for you to review. I don't really have anything additional to say, but just to offer sort of the graph and how that has changed over the years. The next item is transportation. Our current transportation contract has beyond the first year, which had a nearly 20% increase, it has a 4% annual inflation adjustment. And so we would expect a minimum of 4%. We're actually seeing more than 4, it's roughly almost 7%. That's due to additional transportation we've needed to add for students with specialized transportation needs. And so we're seeing an increase, again, not just in the rate, but in the number of buses that we need to have on the road. Next is debt service. Here you can see the dark green is the existing debt service, and you can see how that has reduced over the recent years. And the light green represents the new debt service that would be added related to the K-8 realignment plan. And again, 25-26 doesn't include any of the new debt service, but as we start to look forward with our capital plan that I'll be bringing to the board next time, those future debt service borrowings will be incorporated in the future years of the plan. And then the next one is transfer to capital reserve. So in our millage phase-in plan, the transfer to, we talked about using funds from our reserve, and the way we accomplish that is by reducing our transfer to capital reserve. So it would make most sense to just pay for some of the bills out of the capital reserve fund, and we would spend down the funds. Not all of the things that we are paying for and doing qualify under the rules of capital reserve. So the workaround is to just not transfer as much and use the amount that we would have transferred out of the general fund. So on this graph, you can see in red above each bar the equivalent of what we would have transferred, but we're spending out of the general fund. And the sort of benchmark is that $8 million mark, because had we not engaged this process, as the debt service, let me just go back to the previous slide, as that debt service continued to decline and we were reallocating those dollars to our capital reserve fund, we would have hit about an $8 million mark of annual contributions. And so that's why you see that $8 million mark is sort of that benchmark. And then we're sort of showing, okay, well, how much will we be transferring and how much of that will be used? Again, there's multiple pieces, so you may say, well, why did we use so much in 24-25, but it's very small in 25-26? It really has to do with additional millages being put in place, so there's additional dollars in the general fund to fund some of that plan. There's multiple pieces at work there, and so this really does just represent, based on the millage study, the amount that we would need to be using or not transferring from the general fund to the capital reserve fund. And then finally, the other expenditures item, you can see that's when you take those 19 items that I just highlighted and see what's left, which is all the other expenditures, it's really minimal. It's a savings of $10,000. And so, sorry, I just remembered something I want to go back and touch on. And so you can see that all those other items are relatively negligible in terms of the overall increase. I believe I jumped over the property liability and cyber insurance, which is sort of important. Let me just circle back to that. You can see that currently the increase is about 9.62%. Late last week, I had a conversation with our insurance broker, and they received an early indication from Utica National, which is our insurance company, that they are doing a statewide increase for all of their accounts in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which will be between 18 and 25% for 25-26. And so we've obviously talked about going to market, which is that process of seeing who else is out there. The sad reality is there are only about 3, quote, players, 3 insurance companies who insure school districts in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Utica National, who are with Church Mutual and Liberty Mutual. So obviously we will do our best to leverage them against each other. But obviously based on that information, I feel like that is a sort of a light estimate in terms of expenses for next year. And again, to be continued, that's an item that we always take a second look closer to the end of the year, and then we update that. But again, we will do everything we can to try to come back with something that's far less than an 18 to 25% for next year. So that brings us to sort of our summary slide. Here on the screen, you can see it, slide 20. You can see I'm going to go down the 25-26 budget column. You can see the total revenue, which we talked about last time, of roughly $194 million. Total expenditures of roughly $207 million. Remember that we include budgetary reserve. Budgetary reserve is that expenditure line item that we include that's unallocated in case something comes up, some unforeseen circumstance that we cannot have contemplated when we were putting the budget together. So that's in there. We certainly hope that we don't use that. So then we remove that budgetary reserve to come up with our anticipated expenditures, those expenditures that we anticipate having during the course of the fiscal year. when we subtract the anticipated expenditures from the total revenue, you can see there's a deficit of $3.1 million. Remember that a portion of that is the technology funds that is a planned spend down of fund balance. You can see that the beginning fund balance, as we talked about during the last presentation, is estimated to be roughly $24.2 million. With the $3.1 million deficit, we'd have an ending fund balance of roughly $21.1 million. I did add one more slide this year just to break this down in a different way. So again, you can see the total revenues, the total expenditures, and so I struck a total there. That's the total deficit, and then backing out the budgetary reserve and the network infrastructure. That's the only thing that's in 25-26. Shows the final structural deficit, as I will call it. So we do have a structural deficit at this point of $1.9 million, and we recognize that, and we are actively working on how to remediate that and how we, work that out of the budget. But we do, in all transparency, that is not a planned use of fund balance like the ESSER offset funds were in the previous years or network infrastructure is for the current year. So actually that brings us to the end of the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Saul, and thank you again for a well thought out presentation for the board to listen to. Now I'll open up the floor to questions from the board. Ms. Klotz.
Thank you, Mr. Saul, for that presentation. I love hearing about the insurance. Could you just repeat that deficit? I'm sorry, my eyes are kind of crossing at this point.
Sure. The last slide?
Yes, please.
Sure. So it's really just another way of looking at the information on slide 20. And so it's just presented differently. You have the total revenues of $194 million, less the total expenditures of $207 million, gives you a preliminary deficit of $12.9 million, okay? A portion of that is the budgetary reserve, which we hope not to spend, okay? So we remove that. And then the $1.1 million is the use of funds for technology infrastructure, which is a planned spend down of our fund balance. It's money we're setting aside in fund balance that we're actively planning to use. So the bottom line is there's a deficit of $1.9 million that is not a planned use of that fund balance at this point. And it's a deficit that we're working to try to figure out how to eliminate.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Klotz. Dr. Whitney.
Just one quick question, and maybe you've addressed this in prior years, or forgive me if it's an uninformed question, but is there a similar type of consortium that can be used for property liability cyber insurance, or is that not something that exists?
It's not something that exists. Yeah, there's some work on a cyber consortium because cyber insurance, you may recall, we went through a period where that was not only pricey but difficult to obtain because of the cyber risk. We did a lot of remediation within the district, the technology department implementing certain protocols, but there's some work to form a consortium or coalition around the cyber insurance. Unfortunately, with the property casualty, there isn't. Everybody's needs are somewhat different. Yeah. And I think even if we need to be really careful, because if you purchase a policy that costs less, there are sometimes exclusions that might come back later to, Yeah. What I will say is, and I think the board can reflect on this, we've had really like white glove service from Utica National. The first year we were with them is when we had the flood at the high school, and there were no questions asked. They came in and covered it. We've had other things come up that that we as a district have been covered, that other districts have experienced that have not been covered. So it's sort of that balancing act of white glove service versus that significant increase. So we'll certainly evaluate it and make a recommendation to the board at the appropriate time.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Ms. Bowman?
Yeah, this may not be for this presentation. I think a while back, there was some communication with the board when the state increased the amounts in the property tax rebate program, and that we as a board might be revisiting our version around budget season. When does that discussion come?
We are looking at that, and we do look at that. It typically comes up around the April timeframe when we actually look at the property tax rebate program.
Okay, thank you. I'll just hold for that.
Sure.
You know, just in looking at these expenses and how important our priorities are going forward, even though we haven't even gotten to that part yet. This is just an overall comment that I think any way that we can look to trim some of these costs can only help us in the future. Just as you were talking, I was wondering if there's a way we can collaborate with a nearby district like Salisbury to combine bus runs to some of these charter schools where you only have a couple kids on a bus traveling pretty far distances. And since, I mean, parts of Salisbury are, I can walk to Salisbury District from my house, even though I'm in East Penn. So and I know they have the same issue where they're really struggling with these transportation costs. So I don't know if like creative ideas like that, or even having buildings compete to try to reduce some of their, you know, dumpster costs or things can help us bring some of these other costs down so that we have more money to spend on some of our priorities. I think that would be great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bowman. Any additional comments? Okay, I'll just close. Again, thank you very much for the presentation. For myself, you know, focusing on that $1.9 million deficit from what we're comparing the existing or the current lay of the land for revenues and expenditures. Obviously, we're still in the early stages of the process. You know, as what typically happens over time, we can refine our revenue and expenditure number expectations. I do think we're a little bit more challenged this year. I think, you know, suggestions like Ms. Bowman said for trying to find ways to maybe trim some costs would certainly be helpful. But I do think that given this gap, we may have to take a harder look at what we've included in what we've included in the budget at this point, and you know what we keep, what we may remove, what we may pare down. And again, what's buried in this analysis is, you know, taking the full Equin index for the real estate taxes, and so obviously that's something that we're going to have to stay focused on and trying to, you know, even shave that as we go through the process. But again, you know, I recognize that we're early and there's a lot more information that has to come for an analysis. But again, you know, this is very, very helpful and useful for, you know, for looking at where we are and where we can go. Okay, with that, again, thank you for the presentation.
Sure, thank you. If I may make one final comment.
Sure.
As a reminder, next time we will bring the long-range financial plan. That will continue to be based on the information that has been presented, simply so that there's sort of this longitudinal continuity, so that, you know, the revenues and expenses you've seen, you know, we go into the full plan, and then we will start that revision process. And actually, we'll be working on that long before you see it. But I just wanted to offer that reminder so that when you see it, it's like, well, wait a minute, nothing's changed here. That's purposeful so that you can sort of absorb the concepts and how it's laid out before we start having numbers move around. So,
okay.
Thank you,
All right.
Dr. Levinson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Saul. All right, next on the agenda is personnel and approval of personnel items under item A. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, Mr. Saul, will you please call the roll?
Before I do that, could you remind me who moved and seconded that motion, since I was in transit when I... If I don't have it, Mrs. Allen will give me a tin ear.
Smith moved it.
And Pelagi seconded it.
Thank you.
Go team, all right.
Mr. Flaggy.
Aye.
Ms. Ford.
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Klotz.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Dr. Whitney.
Aye.
Ms. Bowman.
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Mr. Saul. Next is business operations. There are 4 items, but we're going, if there's no objections, I'd like to take a motion on items A and B together.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? All right, seeing none, Mr. Saul, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Ms. Klotz, sorry.
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Flaggy?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Mr. Saul. Items C and D are related to the LERTA, and as I understand it, we'd like to continue our discussion. So the first step is to take the tabled motion from the last meeting and bring it off the table, at which point, if I understand correctly, we can resume our general discussion of that, at which point we can consider the current proposal, propose amendments and whatnot, and then ultimately agree upon a motion to then vote upon. So first up is, as an item C, is to take from the table the LERTA. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Okay, are there any comments, questions? All right, Mr. Saul, please call the roll.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Ms. Klotz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Flaggy?
Aye.
Ms. Ford?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Mr. Saul. Mr. Fisher has stated that there is one minor change to make on the existing draft of the LERTA and to make a, as you call it, friendly amendment.
Yeah, on the third whereas, it identifies the property with a specific PIN number, and that PIN number needs to be slightly corrected. Noticed it was in error. The correct PIN number is 5494-7447-4892, space 1. We could have, Jared, if we could have a friendly amendment to agree that that's now before the board.
Okay. So I can get a motion on that?
Yeah.
Okay. Since it's a friendly amendment, I'm sure we can all agree that this is a good thing to do. May I have a motion to accept that amendment?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, questions? Seeing none, Mr. Saul, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Ms. Klotz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Flaggy?
Aye.
Ms. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Mr. Saul. Okay, at this point, we can resume discussion. And as I mentioned, if there are any proposed changes, we can discuss that and perhaps, make an amended motion as well. So I would open the floor to the board. Dr. Whitney.
Sure, I'll start start by thanking my colleagues and Dr. Levinson for agreeing to table this to this meeting. Obviously, I was not present at the last meeting, and appreciate the opportunity to be part of this and potential vote tonight. I can be relatively succinct here. Was on the fence about this for quite some time, really went back and forth and considered, I think, what are valid arguments on both sides. In the end, to me, this really comes back to first principles, which is that we are a school district. We are not able to, nor is it our duty to, provide financial support to a for-profit entity in our district, no matter how much we might approve of that project, and I certainly do approve of this project, and I think it's a worthy project. Our colleagues on the Borough Council certainly don't question their agreement to LERTA in this case, and we'll see where our colleagues in Lehigh County go. But from our standpoint, I think the potential financial cost to us and our current financial situation, which is, I would say, the same as our financial situation always is, which is that we are trying to scrape as much as we can to educate the students of this district. And that is our role and that is our job. And I harbor no ill will whatsoever to Western developers, and I'm glad that they are taking on this project. I can only imagine that they did their financial due diligence and considered both acceptance of and rejection of a LERTA. I'm sure that there are very good reasons why they would like to see this happen, but I cannot support the district granting a LERTA to this entity at this time for this project when we have many, many needs that we can apply those tax dollars to. And I would like personally to be able to apply them in full to those needs. And so those are my thoughts at this point, and that is essentially my position. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Whitney. Any additional comments from the board? Ms. Klotz?
I agree with Mr. Whitney. Sorry, Dr. Whitney. And I am an Emmaus resident. I fully appreciate the benefits that will come from the Furnace Street location, creating multiple homes for the community. However, I am voting against the LERTA. Emmaus residents are taking on a large tax increase in part because of the tax abatement already offered and approved for Western development for this. And ultimately, I feel like the Emmaus residents in particular would be kind of double taxed or, give up more than the remainder of the school district. And also, as I clarified or asked Mr. Saul to clarify, we have quite a deficit already. And struggling to come up with funds, we're leaving all of this money on the table. So I will also disagree. Or vote against, excuse me. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly?
I'm in favor of this LERTA. I see it as a revenue builder. I see what we're making on this property now is going to be greatly increased as the years progress. I also see it as encouraging building and supporting this community building project. So I'd be open to discussing the terms of the LERTA and negotiating there to try to find one. But right now, I support this LERTA.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kelly. Additional comments? Mr. Flagey?
Yeah, I'm really on the fence with this and put a lot of thought into it over the past couple weeks here. And for me, it's kind of fairly simple. I'm kind of against this, well, I am against this LERTA based on the fact that I just feel I'm getting tired of, and many taxpayers out there always continuously have to take on this financial burden. To Dr. Whitney's point, I'm sure Western went out and did all their research and figured out where their numbers were either way. I do appreciate the fact that they've come in and taken on this blighted property. I, as a borough resident here for, many years now, I don't want to get into my age, but have always seen that property and, it's just an eyesore. So unfortunately, I just look at it financially, to the taxpayer. We can't just keep on taking on this burden. So I'll be a no.
Additional comments? Mr. Jankowski?
I'll just reiterate kind of some of what I said last meeting. I respect what my colleagues are saying. I don't view this as a tax burden. We're not losing a tax base. We're gaining a tax base any way you look at it. And over the 5-year period, it'll increase. So I don't see this as a burden on anyone. It's just going to be a benefit to the school district all around. So I do support the LERTA.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jankowski. Additional comments? Okay, well, I'll make mine. I'm not going to speak for, I think it was almost 15 minutes the last time, so I'm not going to reiterate all that. But I did want to at least touch on several key points that I made the last time, which, and I still firmly believe that this is in the best interest of our district. I do think that, as the district, we have the authority to extend this kind of tax abatement. I think that something like this, which again, has a lot of solid arguments in favor or against, you do have to weigh the overall decision based on a big picture viewpoint. Certainly the project has a tremendous community benefit. I do think it's extremely important that the district remain and act as a partner with each of our boroughs and other entities that the district contains. And Emmaus, did take what I think was an astute step to help their community promote development or hard to develop properties that, again, they can expand their tax base. And again, if they're expanding their tax base, we're also expanding ours. And my fear is that, if we don't do this, perhaps, this district becomes a less desirable place for development to occur, in which case, whatever short-term gain we realize from the tax revenue from this project is going to be less than what we might gain if we were to have additional projects come into the district. I do think, as the LERTA is targeted for specific types of properties, deteriorated properties, and so, I think as a district, I feel like that we can, when we consider this kind of abatement, and again, being sensitive to perceived tax burden, if you will, from our residents, if we can do something that can promote the development of deteriorated properties and do this kind of targeted tax abatement overall and over time, we will have a solid gain. So I think, and I did say this at the very end of my comments, I think one of the big things and big hangups that some of my colleagues have and are leading them to not support is the potential tax loss, if you will, if we're not charging the full real estate tax over those years. In very rough terms, the original proposal that we had, taking it over 5 years, 180, 60, 40, 20, in very rough terms was about $800,000 in tax revenue would be, abated back to the Western Development, and again, to help them, make this or ensure this is going to be a successful project. What I had suggested last time, and I'm hoping that my colleagues can, support amending the current resolution, would be to consider a shortened tax abatement scheme. And what I had said before was doing it over 3 years at a 75, 50, and 25% of abatement, while maintaining the 10-year window. So you'd have this 3 years LERTA and then now 7 years of no tax reassessment to go along with that. In very rough calculation, or rough terms, you take that $800,000 loss, quote unquote, now down to about $400,000 over 3 years. Now, that's not an insignificant amount of money. It is something that could certainly help afford some of the things, but again, I think there are a lot of truly valuable aspects to participating in the LERTA. Again, helping our individual municipalities, gaining a reputation as a place to do smart development and the like that I think really are going to help us in the long run. So again, I support that, and if there's an appetite to amend the resolution to what I just proposed in terms of a 3-year schedule, I would like to hear my colleagues' thoughts on that, and perhaps make a motion to amend. Mr. Jankowski?
I would support that. I think that's a good balance. Quite frankly, I think we need to make a decision. This is gone on for several meetings. And either it's going to go or it's not. So I make the motion so that we can resolve this one way or the other and move forward.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jankowski. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Klotz, second.
I just want to be clear with the motion, just so we're all
Sure.
clear. So the amended motion, as I heard it, is to have a 3-year tax exemption. Year one would be 75%. The exempt portion of assessed valuation would be 75%. Year two, exempt portion of assessed valuation would be 50%. In year three, following completion, the exempt portion of assessed valuation would be 25%. That's the only change you're.
Well, the other change I wanted to was and I think it's the clause here.
I thought I also heard you say that you wanted to change the period from the paragraph 6, which was from the effective date of the resolution and continuing for a period of 5 years following the exemption. Following the expiration of the tax exemptions, the owner may not seek or be entitled to a reassessment of the property.
I'd like to
I
preserve.
thought I heard you say you wanted to change that.
Change that to 7. From 5
5
to 7.
5 to 7.
To keep the 10-year window.
Okay,
Yep.
just so we're all clear.
Okay. All right, the motion has been made and it has been seconded. Are there additional comments from the board? Ms. Bowman?
Yeah, this is sort of an aside, but I just wanted to say that for probably one of the more controversial topics that I've been involved with on the board, I'm really impressed with how civil our conversations have been. And, you know, we all, I can guarantee that this is going to be a split vote and it's going to be very close and we're all going to get along with each other afterward. And I just wish things like this, discussions like this happened elsewhere in society, not just here. But that said, I'll probably be figuring out, I'm very much on the fence, so I don't even know how I'm going to vote until you call my name. So thanks.
Well said.
All right, additional commentary. Nobody's going to show their cards. Okay. All right, well, with no further discussion, we will now call the roll. Mr. Saul.
Ms. Klotz?
And to be clear, I'm voting if I want the LERTA or not.
Yeah, point of order. Is this only to modify and then we have another vote to approve or not approve the language?
So you're voting on the amended motion that you made, which is to, for a 3-year versus a 5-year exemption. And that's the year one, year following completion, 75, 50, and 25, and changing the period from 5 to 7 years when the owner of the property may not seek or be entitled to a reassessment.
But to
of
Ms.
the
Klotz's
property.
question, is this the actual,
This is the motion that you're voting on right now. If this motion is approved, the issue is done for the night. If the motion is not approved, you are back to the original motion that was removed from the table as modified by the friendly amendment. Is that clear then?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so wait, so now we're going to vote on the amended motion, and then we'll have another vote if that passes, then we'll have another vote if we.
No,
Okay.
that's where you misunderstood.
Yeah.
If the motion passes, where it's five or more of you agree to the amended motion, that is it for this item. You'll move on to the next agenda item. If that motion is defeated, then you must return to the original motion that was brought back from the table, which is the 5-year schedule.
and vote on that? And then we would vote on that one.
You would vote on that, correct, because that's still out there. You should be clear. If you're not clear, I'll try again.
I believe I am clear. I just want to make sure, like I've already said, I'm not going to vote for, I'm not going to say yes to the LERTA. So I want to make sure that what I'm doing now is not saying yes.
If you say no to this.
Yeah.
And the majority votes no.
Yeah.
Then we vote again on the original LERTA, the 5-year that was presented to us. So you'd get 2 opportunities to say no.
Okay, thank you. That's the clarity that I absolutely wanted, so I could be completely clear on this. Okay,
So if we're not clear the first time, we're clear the second time.
yes, thank you. Okay, so, no.
You haven't been asked.
Wait, well, no, didn't they just say my,
Yes, Ms. Klotz.
yeah,
I apologize.
That's fine.
all right now. No.
Mr. Smith,
No.
Dr. Whitney,
No.
Ms. Bowman,
Yes.
Mr. Fleggy,
No.
Ms. Ford,
Yes.
Mr. Jankowski,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
5 ayes, 4 nays.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes 5-4. We will get an amended document written and signed. Thank you very much. And yes, I would also like to acknowledge Ms. Bowman's comments. I think that, this is a testament to a well-functioning board, and appreciated the discussion. Okay. Whew. All right. Thank you. All right, moving on in the agenda, we will now move on to curriculum. We're looking at a motion on item A, educational conferences.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, Mr. Solid, please call the roll.
Ms. Bowman,
Aye.
Mr. Fleggy,
Aye.
Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Aye.
Ms. Klotz,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Dr. Whitney,
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye. Oh, okay.
Oh.
I was waiting for you to
9
say.
ayes.
9 ayes. There you go. Okay, item B is the second reading for the proposed 25-26 East Penn School District student-teacher calendar. I do not believe there were any changes from the first reading.
No changes.
Okay, so are there any further comments or questions from the board that we'd like to bring forth? Okay, well, things are looking good then. We'll bring this for third reading in a future meeting then. Okay, next item is a policy, update of current policy, first reading. Would administration like to introduce and make some comments?
Okay, good evening. So before you, we have existing policies to review. There are no new policies. Just a brief overview. If it's okay, I'll package the first 5 together. Policy 103.1, Policy 247, Policy 249, Policy 317.1, Policy 824. All these policies together in a package. There's no substantial changes to any of these policies. The language addressing discrimination and harassment in each of these policies was revised to more broadly reference the responsibilities for coordinating with policies addressing discrimination and harassment. The language on incident reporting to law enforcement and the PA Department of Education was also updated in each of these policies to reflect the current school code terminology based on Act 33, similar to some other policies we reviewed recently. So that's the first 5 policies. So I'll kind of stop there if there's any questions.
Okay, any questions from the board? Mr. Jankowski?
I think they're good clarifying edits, anything that makes it an easier read and less ambiguity. So I appreciate the changes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, seeing none, you may proceed.
Okay, so then the next 2 change, I'll take one at a time. The next change, policy 607, we are recommending to the board to eliminate this policy. This is the 607 tuition income. We do not accept tuition students and do not formulate any tuition rates. And so we also discussed this with PSBA. They completely support that plan. Mr. Fish was also involved in the conversation as well. And so we'll just be recommending that we remove policy 607 completely.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions? It makes sense to eliminate that, so thank you. Next item.
Okay, and then policy 801, it's just the attachment. We've been, as you probably know, with many of our policies, we've been looking to eliminate any dollar amounts in any of our policies so that you don't have to bring it back to do 3 readings in order to move forward on a policy, especially when it's driven by something like states, by the state and funding sources elsewhere. And so with this attachment to policy 801, we're looking to remove the fee structure, attachment only, no changes to any parts of the policy, but to remove the fee structure. All the information will continue to be on the website and be available, but there is absolutely not a necessity for this attachment. Again, talked with PSBA over this recommendation. They also recommend removing the attachment as well. And so that's our recommendation from the administration standpoint.
Great. Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll advance all these to second reading, and thank you, Dr. Povolitis, for that overview.
Thank you.
All right, next item is other educational entities. We have 3 separate motions to approve the budgets with our partner institutions. The first is to approve the proposed general operating budget for the CLIU. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? Dr. Whitney has volunteered to address as best as he can, if you have questions. Okay, with no questions, we'll move on to a vote. Dr. Saul, or Mr. Saul?
I appreciate the designation. I think I've just earned it. I'm sorry. Mr. Flaggy.
Aye.
Ms. Ford.
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Klotz.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Dr. Whitney.
Aye.
Ms. Bowman.
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Mr. Saul. Next item is to approve the LTRI-C 25-26 operating debt service and capital budgets. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, I don't know if anybody has any questions or clarifications they want to bring up on this. Okay, seeing none, Mr. Solly, please call the roll.
Ms. Ford.
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Klotz.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Dr. Whitney.
Aye.
Ms. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Flaggy.
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Okay, item C is to approve the LCTI 25-26 General Operating Fund and Academic Center Fund budgets. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
If there are any questions, myself, Mr. Smith, Mr. Falegi, and Mr. Jankowski might be able to answer them. Okay, seeing none. Mr. Saul, please call the roll.
Mr. Jankowski.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Klotz.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Dr. Whitney.
Aye.
Ms. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Flaggy.
Aye.
Ms. Ford.
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you. Item D, the long-awaited CLIU report.
It's worth it.
Dr. Whitney, would you please tell us what's going on with CLIU?
Thank you, Dr. Levinson. This is a report from the meeting that took place on January 29th. The CLIU board typically does not meet in the month of February, so one meeting since my last report. Couple of items of note. Back in December, the CLIU welcomed State Representative Doyle Heffley to their Carbon County Early Learning Center, so hosted a legislative visit to showcase their early intervention programs. And this is something that the current leadership in the CLIU is putting emphasis on. They're making a lot of outreach to state legislators, and having them visit sites around the IU. We received a report of the 23-24 fiscal 24 audit from Campbell, Rappold, and Urasitz, and pleased to report that the audit was clean, no findings, and so the IU's sound financial management continues. We had a presentation on the annual Toy Adaptation Day, which is just a remarkable event. So this took place, again, all the way back in December, in early December. But this is an event where the IU hosts students from LCTI along with students from within the IU who work together to modify toys for children with disabilities, specifically physical disabilities, that make them unable to manipulate small switches and buttons and things of that nature. So they rewire these toys to and adapt them with larger switches so that students can activate them more independently and more easily. And then they get to showcase these toys. They get to give them out to some of the children that are going to benefit from them, and they get to try them out. And it's just a really wonderful event, and just a real testament to the IU every year, doing things like this, utilizing adaptive technology, utilizing partnerships with LCTI, and utilizing the skills of their own students who are able to do some of this technical work as well. So really wonderful event. There's an amazing video on the CLIU website I would encourage anyone to go and check out. Finally, they received the Special Education Facilities Plan Committee report. The IU has this review every year of their facilities, and the committee makes recommendations of what they feel will be necessary in the coming year. So in this case, they're looking at the 25-26 school year and anticipating potential new facilities being needed. No recommended changes in Carbon County. In Lehigh County, they are recommending 2 additional multiple disabilities behavioral support classrooms for grades K through 2, locations to be determined. They are also recommending a K through 2 life skills classroom, additional one in Lehigh County. And they are also going to move the Lehigh Learning and Achievement School and the Lehigh County Enhanced Autism to a new location in Center Valley, where both of those facilities can be co-located and a little more centrally located than they currently are around the county. And so those recommendations will be taken up by the board at some point independently as they are considered. So that is the extent of my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Whitney. Any comments or questions? And appreciate it, and looking forward to your March report. Actually, there's no February meeting, so.
Right.
We'll have to
Wait till
we'll have to
March.
wait. Okay. All right. Moving on to announcements. We held an executive session tonight where we discussed matters of litigation. Our next regular board meeting will be in 2 weeks on Monday, March 10th at 7:30 in this room. With no further business before the board, I'll now accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?